You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Tonight, Hurricane Fiona approaches Bermuda and Canada and several other systems to track. Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Live Tropical Weather Bulletin for September 23rd. And here we are with a bustling tropics right now. Category 4 Fiona, still extremely powerful. Gaston near the Azores, Newton in the Eastern Pacific, and two unnamed tropical storms in the Western Pacific, although 18W does have a Philippine name, Carding. Look at the Atlantic right now on day 115 of hurricane season. Of course we have Fiona and Gaston, but look at those three other areas of interest. Two of them high chance, one of them moderate chance. So the Atlantic is very much alive. That 90% in the western part in the Caribbean Sea is what a lot of people are watching. In the Eastern Pacific, Newton is going to be another throwaway storm probably. Doing pretty decent though, 65 miles per hour earlier, now down to 60 miles per hour as it saunters off towards the west. 14th tropical storm as well. And in the Western Pacific, 17W, a tropical storm approaching Japan, and 18W, a Philippine threat, and another area of interest at 40% headed for the Mariana Islands and possibly Guam. So more action in the Western Pacific there. Indian Ocean though is quiet, nothing much to talk about here, and at this point we'll have a very inconvenient moment where the scene will cut off and it'll just throw to me in the studio. So be prepared for that as we finish looking at our overview. Right now with myself in the studio, my name is Nathan Foy, and we've got a lot to talk about of course. As we've just seen, the National Hurricane Center have just come out with a new advisory on Fiona of course, and they are estimating a pressure of 932, so more deepening going on in this storm right now. A category 4 with winds of 130 miles per hour, and a big threat for Bermuda where a hurricane warning is in effect right now, and for large parts of Canada, Atlantic Canada. Hurricane watch for Nova Scotia from Hubbards to Brule, Prince Edward Island, Isle de la Madeleine, and Newfoundland from Parsons Pond to Indian Harbour. Also, tropical storm watch for St Andrews, New Brunswick to west of Hubbards, Nova Scotia, west of Brule to Cap Madeline, Quebec, Anticosti Island, Sheldrake, Quebec to north of Parsons Pond, Newfoundland, West Bay, Labrador to Hare Bay, Newfoundland, and Indian Harbour to St Lawrence, Newfoundland. Now, on the forecast cone, which is visible here, very tight cone there as well, a thin one. Major hurricane expected for another 24 hours before it starts weakening and turns post-tropical. Right now, it would appear that we'll have a 110 mile per hour post-tropical landfall over eastern Nova Scotia, and this is going to be a major threat to the Canadian Maritimes. To get a perspective from that nation right now, even though she's on the other side of Canada, we have Marlene to tell us about what's going on with their warnings and any other news you have right now. Marlene? Oh, was I catching her unawares? Oh dear. Well, let's talk to some of our other guests right now. We have Patrick with us, and we also have David. Let's go first to Patrick. What are you showing us right now? Oh, you're showing us the National Hurricane Center cone as well. Well, we'll keep it on my imagery here whilst you tell us what your latest thoughts are.
Alrighty, so right now we are currently dealing with the absolute monster of a force of Hurricane Fiona. The latest NHC advisory has it still maintaining Category 4 strength. However, it has intensified recently down to a 932 millibar hurricane. As you can see on satellite imagery, the storm is an absolute monster. Eyeball, or eye, is incredibly large. However, it does appear now on the latest satellite imagery that it could be retracting a little bit on the northwestern quadrant of the eye wall. It does appear that the it does appear that the center has been exposed slightly on the northwestern quadrant of the eye wall. Given that, I would expect that the Fiona will still maintain its strength, however, slightly weakened down to high-end category 3, past to just the northwest of Bermuda, and then as it turns to the north, it will go post-tropical and potentially cause a very historic landfall in Atlantic Canada as a potentially major hurricane slash extratropical cyclone deal. And convection still on the storm is very impressive. However, it does appear that there is a possible sign that Fiona could begin weakening due to the fact that its northwestern core of the eye wall is exposing a bit on satellite imagery. You
We're
can
seeing it.
clearly see, yeah, you can clearly see that that northwestern flank of the eye wall is getting a bit exposed here. So we could see a weakening phase. However, I don't think that's going to have an impact on anything within the next 12 hours, and we could see reprieve with
Most of
Fiona's weakening
most of the
soon.
impacts, though, I think are pretty locked in at this point.
Yeah, so Bermuda is going to be experiencing hurricane force wind gusts, although the hurricane force winds only extend 70 miles out from the center. However, they will be experiencing some considerable impacts, including high surf, potential heavy rainfall, and some rough seas at best, as well as hurricane force wind gusts. So, yeah, if you're in Bermuda, I would keep an eye out on the storm still, as it does pose a somewhat considerable threat to the island at this time.
All right, thank you. And my observation there as well, looks like that eye is starting to shrink a little bit and could be possibly on its way out. We'll have to monitor that over the next few hours. We're also now joined by Ethan, who has a perspective, as far as I can see, across the whole Atlantic basin. So why don't you tell us about that, Ethan, and welcome.
Hi, Nathan. Hope your day is going well. Obviously, you guys have been talking about Fiona, still a very impressive Category 4 hurricane. Obviously, you've gone over the National Hurricane Center cone, obviously. But here we have Tropical Storm Gaston, which is now bringing impacts to portions of the Azores. Pulling up the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone on Gaston, you can see that it's forecast to loop down south and then make a turn back towards the west and undergo some weakening and will eventually turn post-tropical. I'm just looking at when they actually forecast that, so just give me one moment. It appears that they forecast it on the afternoon of Saturday. So Saturday afternoon, they
Yeah,
forecasted
it's
it
quite soon.
becoming post-tropical. So yeah, becoming very sheared. A lot of the convection on the eastern side of the circulation going up into England and parts of Europe even. But that's it with Gaston, really. Moving down here, we have Invest 90L starting to emerge off of Africa. Obviously, this is on the edge style imagery, so it's going to be very pixelated over
But
here.
already looking good.
Very good. This is maybe the reason why we're actually giving it right now a 70% chance of development. National Hurricane Center are 10% lower, but either way, 10% doesn't really make a difference. This does look quite likely, in my opinion, to develop as it moves north and will eventually teeter out somewhere over the northern portion of this formation area.
But sometimes you
Then,
get these systems that look really good when they emerge off Africa and they just collapse, don't they?
yeah, which is that's why I didn't go higher. Moving on, we have I forget this invest number 99 now, I think.
Yeah.
99. You are
99
correct.
now is here. But looking very sad. Has to be
At the
said.
minute, but
Um,
when we go over time towards the end of this 5 day period, I think it's going to look better. Models support it.
I can agree with that, and that's why we have given it a 40% chance of development right now. And
Full
now
agreement.
this is the system that everyone is going to be monitoring closely. I think we have Meso on it. We do.
Yep.
I think the sun is set on it.
Yep.
It has. That's unfortunate. Okay. But here is some infrared imagery on Invest 98L. Looks to be firing some convection over its center now. Tropical Cyclone Genesis is very slowly ongoing, so it would not surprise me if this becomes a tropical storm within the next 24 to 36 hours, maybe even a little bit past that. But we're certainly, I think, at least as far as my opinion goes, we're going to be seeing a tropical storm before it passes this line, this north-south line with Jamaica and eastern Cuba. So maybe a general development area like this for 98L. But once it gets past this line, the questions still remain. Where is it going to go? It could go as far as trackers goes. I'll just shift my screen up to here. 98L is going to come up here, and once it gets past this line here, where does it go? Does it go into the Yucatan Peninsula and into the Western Gulf? A Western Gulf track is less confident, but that is still possible. Will this storm turn north and go over Western Cuba and go out into the Atlantic, bypassing over southwestern Florida? That remains a distinct possibility. That is also possible. Or could it go right in the middle, go over the Yucatan Channel, and eventually become a very major system and threaten portions of the U.S. Gulf Coast? That is also possible. So really anywhere, I would say, if you're in Jamaica, the southern coast of Cuba, maybe even the northern portions up towards Florida, the entirety of Florida, all the way down along the Gulf Coast, probably down to Corpus Christi, Texas, maybe even the Yucatan Peninsula, even a little bit along the coast of northern Central America. I would watch the system very closely for potential impacts in your area, whether it be heavy rainfall, rough surf, strong winds, a major hurricane landfall. Anything is possible with this system, and it bears very close monitoring.
Now, no one will be able to give us a concrete answer for days about where this storm will end up, or indeed how strong. Current ensembles, though, Ethan, would suggest a sort of like a mean average location of landfall being close to Tampa or just north on the west coast of Florida. Of course, there is a lot of movement in that, though, that it could move east or west.
Yeah, well, that's if a landfall occurs in Florida, even, because we could have a system that comes up here and sort of goes like that, kind of like a Charlie landfall, I guess you could say, but not like at an angle where Charlie exited Florida. But the system also could go northward and make a very slow curve. We could also see that too. So there is a lot of possibilities with this system. We really won't know where the system is going in the Gulf of Mexico until really it is rapidly intensifying in the Western Gulf. A lot of the models do have rapid intensification in this area, and I think that it's quite likely that we're going to be seeing it happen.
I'll tell you what, one thing I'll say, though, is that when you look at all the ensembles, when you look at the easternmost and the westernmost, that's probably where you draw your cone extents. And I can tell you that's going to be a massive end of the cone on day 5 and 6, because the easternmost ensemble goes through central Cuba and through the northernmost Bahamas, recurving east of the Florida Keys. So no landfall in the US at all. And the westernmost ensemble,
if I could interject here real quick,
goes through Honduras, just to let you know.
Sorry. So if I can quickly interject here, I've been looking at most of the models over the past couple, 24 hours, and GFS has been hinting at 2 possible scenarios. There is currently a high-pressure system located over portions of the deep south region. However, once that high pressure moves westward, the Gulf of Mexico is going to be wide open and ready to prime storms up. Also, GFS has been hinting on several runs that a Gulf Coast landfall is most likely going to come from this system, and a few particular runs have been having this storm potentially make landfall in Louisiana and then recurve back up northeast and potentially last all the way into the mid-Atlantic within the next week or so. However, those are experimental models, and you should take those with a grain of salt, as those are over 200 hours out.
I would say that a landfall really anywhere along in the Louisiana area and westwards is of very low confidence and very low probability. I'd say if this is going to make landfall in the U.S. Gulf Coast area, it's going to be somewhere probably from Miami all the way down to probably the Mobile, Alabama area. This is going to be the most likely area of a U.S. Gulf Coast landfall if it happens. Now, that is subject to change, as this system is still well beyond the 5-day period for U.S. impacts. So it bears monitoring very closely, as I've been saying. It's just right now, really anything, honestly, past Jamaica is very low confidence right now.
And that's the juicy part of the forecast as well, the part where it's supposed to intensify rapidly. Unfortunately, we can't tell you really what's going to happen. There is no way of doing that. Unfortunately,
Well,
our
I
technology
think that
isn't good
we
enough yet to know fully. And I guess sometimes, no matter how much you put into model outputs, it's just going to play out, and we just don't know what's going to happen until it does.
I still think that we can guarantee what's going to happen to a certain extent. Like it's dead certain that this is going to form at what point. Though where it goes, at what intensity, that we can't say. But what I can say is it's likely that we'll probably be seeing, well, not that area, but we'll probably be seeing a hurricane strength storm in the Western Caribbean. That I can say with a high degree of confidence. I can say 100% confidently that we're going to be seeing at least a tropical storm out of this. But like I said, where does it go? What impacts does it bring? At what intensity? Does it stall? Does it move quickly? Does it die off from wind shear? That I can't say for certain will that end up happening or not.
I am also noticing that the center is shifting a bit southwest, which would lead me to believe that it could potentially struggle with land interaction in northern Belize and northern South America, which would indicate that this storm could potentially struggle a bit before getting to tropical storm status within the next 24 to 36 hours.
Well, I'm looking at
No,
imagery right
no.
now, and here it is on geocolor, and it suggests to me that I don't think so. It looks like it's moving due west, although it is quite close to land and the ABC Islands right now. I think it is still going to have a great shot at forming in the next 24 hours. The more I look at this particular imagery, rotation is clearly evident. A recon in there at all?
No, they
Recon
aren't.
is in there. Oh, actually, no, they're not.
We have recon in Fiona of all
Yes.
things right now.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, it's important. So whenever recon get in there, they might find a storm eventually. I know that ASCAT will be due probably a good 4 hours from now, but it's coming. And we should have ASCAT on... I think it'll end up missing Gaston, but if it hits, it will be in an hour. And Fiona as well in about 3 hours, but that's not really worth anything. Also, ASCAT... the other satellite approaching the Western Pacific systems. Now let's talk about that, Ethan. We've got a waking up Western Pacific once again. Well, I don't want to say waking up because we just had some significant typhoons, but more activity coming here now with 2 new storms that haven't been named, and how curious that is to see. Usually you only get 1 at a time, but we currently have 2 unnamed storms from the JMA.
Yeah, I'll pull up the JTWC's cone real quick on 17W because it's the first in numerical identity. Right now, currently analyzed by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center to be a 30-knot tropical depression. We have it a little bit stronger based on satellite estimates of winds of 40 miles per hour. Very small differences either way, but this is going to bring maybe some really localized impacts, heavy rainfall, maybe some gusty winds at times to Japan, but really not going to be overly a big deal here in Japan.
Oh, I
But
think
what
it
is gonna
could be. I
a
think
big
you
deal-
understate that, actually. Rain threat for the southern prefectures of Japan near the landfall area. There could be over 250 millimeters in a few spots.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Absolutely.
know if it would be that high, but what the big deal is across the Western Pacific is this, 18W. Initial JTWC forecast did call for this storm to only peak at, what was it, 40 knots, I think, now? And if we have a look at the latest JTWC forecast, look at that, a typhoon into landfall, 80-knot peak into Hainan Island now. So that is a big increase in the forecast for the storm now, going to intensify as it pushes towards Luzon, and we'll probably get the name if 17W doesn't steal it. I think the next name is, what is
Talas.
it? Talas, then followed by Noru. I
Oh,
believe.
man, is it?
Let's see what the JMA has for these storms, if they have anything. Let's see.
Both depressions on JMA.
That's good. They do forecast 17W to become a brief tropical storm, so there is that. Looks to be well, what's interesting, I'm noting here on the JMA cone, if I go back to the JTWC's cone here, JWC takes 17W into Japan at this location, though Japan Meteorological Agency looked to be much farther east.
Yeah, not a huge. I mean, it makes a difference, but it's not a huge amount east there. Maybe 100 miles.
And then we've got 18W here. JMA forecast not that much intensification prior to Luzon. That's very interesting. I'd lean more confidence, honestly, in the JWC's forecast here, although at a higher intensity prior to Luzon, personally. But looking in the South China Sea, not that much intensification there either. Maybe a low-end severe tropical storm.
All right. So that's all of the tropics in a nutshell right now, and we'll be looking at the GFS model for everything in the tropics a little bit later on. That will be at 22 in 20 minutes time. But in the meantime, we're looking at the observations of all these. Oh yes, we forgot about that. Why do you keep calling it Norbert?
I don't know. I keep thinking that it's 2020. I don't know what I'm on at this point, but
Tropical Storm Newton in the Eastern
that's
Pacific.
The actual name. Thank you. If imagery could load, it's very sad looking. I have mesoscale up. I can't believe this.
There you go.
But there's Newton, sun setting on the storm. Very, very disappointing. Was very small. I guess we can pull up some more better infrared. That is a tiny storm for the Eastern Pacific, as far as that goes. But going to weaken as it pushes west, not going to impact any land areas. And then we have this area of interest back here. Right now, I'd probably give this a 10% chance of development. Not really probably going to develop into anything big, but bears watching.
I'm not convinced by it. But then again, Eastern Pacific can pull up some surprises. And also the remnants of Madeline still visible there too. Still blowing up a bit of convection, actually.
That's Madeline?
Yep.
It is? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
That's interesting. Madeline and Newton. Almost like a really lesser extent of what happened in 2016. Albeit this isn't two major hurricanes, but you know.
Well, let's go back to the latest satellite imagery of Fiona, and we're watching this very closely to see whether the eye is potentially cracking up, but I'm not sure. In those latest frames, the eye has shrunk, but it looks like the northwestern eye wall might be holding firm. Hurricane warning for Bermuda, hurricane watches for large parts of Atlantic Canada. They really ought to be upgrading all of those to warnings soon. I got a sneaky feeling they might do it at the end of tonight at the 11 p.m. advisory, but we'll see. Let's take your comments and questions as we always do. Start your message with Force 13 all in text in our YouTube chat and it will light up for us. Earth Dart says, chances for Category 5 rapid intensification near Cuba. Chance is always there, even in November. So definitely a chance.
I do have unfortunate news regarding Hurricane Fiona's impacts on Puerto Rico and areas, in particular the Dominican Republic. I have received confirmation or unconfirmed confirmation, but we are looking at a I have been seeing reports of the death toll being 8, but I've seen a recent tweet saying that the death toll now stands at 17 deaths, 14 in Puerto Rico, 2 in the Dominican Republic, and 1 in the Guadeloupe region, which is unfortunately terrible and devastating news. And yeah, I just wanted to break in with that.
Indeed, here's a wide look at the Atlantic. In fact, you can see all the storms here. You can see Fiona there, Gaston right up there on the top right-hand corner, and the area of interest, 98L, down there over the ABC Islands, producing significant cloud tops at this moment in time. Looking decent. Feels like, to me, the more I watch that, Ethan, that they might pull the trigger overnight.
On 98L?
Maybe.
If convection gets over the center enough, maybe.
I'm actually
But
surprised it's not already been declared a PTC a day or two ago.
yeah. Well, I mean, if it was a PTC, where could they put watches and warnings for? Maybe Jamaica, maybe?
But it's got 40-mile-an-hour winds. I would have at least put a tropical storm watch on the ABC Islands.
It does have an LLC, which usually gives tropical depression designations rather than PTCs.
Yeah, it is
Well-
pretty
well-
close to those islands.
Yes, it has a circulation, but I imagine what they're looking for is the convection.
Yes.
I would just like to mention real quick that we do have tropical storm warnings right now in effect for Gaston.
Yes,
I
of
don't know if
course.
you've gone over those, Nathan.
I didn't go over them in detail at all, actually, but we know that the Azores have these warnings. Gaston is pretty close, yeah.
We've got a tropical storm warning for Flores and Corvo in the western Azores, and Fayal, Pico, San Jorge, Graciosa, and Terceira. My bad on the pronunciation of those if I mispronounced them. In the central Azores, and that's about it as far as watches and warnings go. I believe that's for the whole part of the Azores, right?
It sounds like...
I mean, I'm looking on my software here, and it looks like that it's for the whole Azores.
Yeah, the entire Azores chain have that tropical storm warning active right now, which is interesting considering the Eastern Islands probably won't get it.
Yeah, the wind field on this thing isn't terribly large. I can put on the forecasted wind radio. It doesn't even get close to those islands.
No. But there you go, I guess that's caution there. And there is Gaston's satellite imagery looking decent. David, anything you'd like to bring up with us right now?
Well, Hurricane Fiona needs close monitoring. I've just been reading through the latest advisory from the centre, and they're saying that as it edges, or as she edges towards the Canadian region, the wind field's going to expand further. So the conditions are going to be appalling up there, and needs close monitoring. But the one that could impact or go into the Gulf of Mexico, that's another one. Then we've got the two over here on the Westpac. And Nathan, I know when you're coming up to the look at the models, Cyclone Genesis is improving in the southwest Indian Ocean, where Invest 90S was, and there's 3 models on board a possible system. And Gaston, what are we saying about that? Could it impact the Spanish coast?
No.
Not
Well,
that
I mean,
far.
well, I suppose you've got a little bit of an atmospheric plume emitted from Gaston, I guess. Not explored that. Let me just quickly check if there's any significant rain amounts expected for Europe and the Iberian Peninsula. Just quickly going to look at this. Might be a good call, that. Let's just quickly check.
And whilst you're
No,
looking-
actually, no. They're not expect. Is that all from Gaston? No, they're not expecting significant amounts. The Azores, however, could receive maybe 100 millimeters of rain.
If you don't mind, Nathan, I'm just trying to pull up my latest forecast cone that I made on 98L.
There it is.
Well, it was there. There it is. Put that up on my screen now.
Yep.
Yep, so this was made at noon Eastern time today, so this was 8 hours ago. So judging by its current position, that's actually pretty accurate for its current
Correct
position.
so far, yeah.
But forecasting a tropical storm to develop sometime tomorrow afternoon. Might be a little bit earlier than that, actually, now, given trends today. but forecasting a 85-mile-per-hour hurricane at the end of the 5-day period. I did note that's the forecast points, or intensity-wise and position really, for day 4s, or really day 3 through 5. So obviously at day 3 at 60, then 75, then 85. Both of those days are very conservative and are very low confidence. So that could change very quickly, and all depends on what 98L does in the Western Caribbean. And I imagine that once the system becomes a tropical storm, really gets its center going, models should be able to latch onto the system pretty closely, and as such, we'll have a better idea of what intensity 98L will do and where it'll go. But like we've been saying, it's just a waiting game at this point, with waiting until the storm develops. And if you don't mind, Nathan, I can fast forward to my TWO that I made as well.
Okay.
That came out half an
Worldwide
hour
view.
ago. Yeah, because there's a lot going on right now.
There really is.
Where's it gone? I had it for a second.
Well,
Right, here it is. Look at how much is going on around the world right now.
Yep. Massive
lot.
amount of activity there. This is pretty normal for August, September time, particularly in September in the Atlantic. Having said that, how many different systems are there? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It hardly... I think the highest I've ever seen was 11 in 2018, I think it was, or some other time.
In July, probably.
No, in... I think it was early September, actually, when there were 7 storms active, and 6 of them affecting US interests at the same time.
Yeah,
Incredible.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see this kind of activity blossom in the Atlantic now, really globally. Because if you look back, like normally when you think of peak tropical cyclone season, you normally think of early September. You don't really think of mid to late September. And if you look back, early September really wasn't a really active part around the tropics globally. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but you had this magical switch that was flicked when you enter mid to late September, and well, look at where we are now.
It's a wild card season, but with the enormous inactivity that we had, where some basins were running only to 16% of average up till the end of August, I guess something had to give. I don't know if we'll fully understand how it all worked, but maybe some clever people, climatologists-wise, might know or be able to piece it together. We have loads of questions that we ought to get through. What chances major Hurricane Florida affects Maine and potential impacts for Maine? Well, at the moment, I believe that impacts are not going to be significant. We are expecting coastal Maine near the border with Canada. You could get 4 inches of rain maybe as a maximum. So yeah, right next to the border you might see something. In terms of winds, let's flick to the National Hurricane Center's cone, which shows you there, look, in the very area near the border as well, maybe 10% chance of tropical storm force winds. So wind will not be a threat, but rain possibly up to 4 inches. So that's something to consider.
All right, so I guess we can go ahead and go over the models if you want, Nathan.
No, we can't do that yet. Until a little later.
Okay. I'll go ahead and I'll get them ready then.
Now, Griforza says both systems could be named at 9 a.m. Japan time, talking about the Japanese storms. Both have Dvorak 2.0, which is name ready on the Koba scale.
Potentially.
9 a.m. Japan time. When is that? Is that now?
Yeah,
It is, I think.
10:30 here, so probably another half an hour.
No, I think it's already after 9 in Japan, so
Oh.
I don't think they've named... I think they might do their update at the end of the hour. So we might see if we might be able to catch it. Let's see if there's any more questions just now. I know a lot came through and a lot of comments that I'm just really slow on right now. What software do we use on our severe weather coverage? Or is it the same one for the wind fields? It is the same one, pretty much. Although a few of our members use other software too.
I'm just looking over all of the data now regarding that question of the Westpac naming, and it appears extremely likely that they will name Talas and Noru very soon. It appears that Talas will go to 17W simply because that it's called by the JMA right now TDA. And since Talas is the next name on the naming list, it would go to that system, and Noru would be the one who would go to the Philippines. I think that's named, what is it, Carding by Picasa?
That's right, yep. Carding.
Yep. So it appears that Talas and Noru will be joining us pretty soon. Thankfully, this Noru isn't going to be as frustrating to track as its previous iteration, but it could be worse, I suppose. Could be a Cat 5 in the land.
I saw a few more questions regarding the chances that 98L, in quotes, pulls a Charlie.
Honestly, the chance is there for it to do that. Honestly.
Yep. I agree.
I wouldn't give it much thought though. Maybe like a more westerly / stronger Caribbean Charlie, maybe. But like I've been saying, anything regarding 98L right now, very low confidence, and it just bears monitoring, really right now until it gets really near Jamaica, really.
I'm gonna just make a note here real quick that if you are in the United States Gulf Coast, if you are anywhere on the Gulf Coast, like Ethan said earlier, from Miami to New Orleans, you need to monitor like the living life out of the storm, as it can do anything over the next couple of days. And although models have been hinting at a most likely agreed upon track, anything can happen. So if you are in the U.S. Gulf Coast, I would keep a very, very close eye on this storm, as it does have the potential to become a major threat within the next week.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, hello there. That's Marlene in the background.
Okay, they've the Canadian Hurricane Center has given their new update as a 8:56 p.m. ADT, Thursday, September 22nd, tropical cyclone information statement for New Brunswick, for Acadian Peninsula, Bathurst and Chaleur region, Camp Belton and eastern half of Restigouche County, Grand Lake and Queens County, Grand Manan and coastal Charlotte County, Kent County, Cushibugak National Park, Miramichi and area, Moncton and southeast New Brunswick, Mount Carlton, Reynes Highway, Oromocto and Sunbury County, St. John and County, Stanley, Doketown, Blackville area, Sussex, Kennebeca's Valley and Kings County. For Newfoundland and Labrador, Cartwright to Black Tickle, Newfoundland, Norman Bay to Lodge Bay, Red Bear to Lanaz Eau Claire, all of Nova Scotia, all of Prince Edward Island, south of Quebec on Anticosti, Black Sablon, Cheverie, Ferillion National Park, Gaspé and Percé, Grand Vallée area, Ile de la Madeleine, Minneganey, Murdochville area, Natashquan, New Carlisle, Chandler, and New Richmond, Bonaventure area.
Wow.
Fiona is expected to impact Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec with heavy rainfall and powerful hurricane force winds beginning early Saturday. Location 31 degrees north, 68 degrees west. About 1,622 kilometers southwest of Sable Island. Maximum sustained winds 230 kilometers an hour. Present movement northeast at 38 kilometers an hour. Minimum central pressure 935 millibars. This storm is shaping up to be a severe event for Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec. Numerous weather models are quite consistent in their prediction of what we call a deep hybrid low pressure system possessing both tropical and intense winter storm properties with very
Wow.
heavy rainfall and severe winds. The latest forecast guidance brings Hurricane Fiona north towards Nova Scotia waters Friday night, passing through eastern mainland Nova Scotia or western Cape Breton Saturday, and then reaching the lower Quebec North Shore and southeastern Labrador early Sunday. Severe winds and rainfall will have major impacts for eastern Prince Edward Island, eastern Nova Scotia, western Newfoundland, eastern Quebec, and southeastern Labrador. There will also be large waves, especially for the Atlantic coast of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, eastern portions of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And there's a very highly of storm surge for parts of Nova Scotia, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and western Newfoundland. And they're expecting 100 to 200 millimeters of rain at the most.
All right, thank you for that. We had another question about what to expect rainfall-wise in Yarmouth on Nova Scotia. It's on the western tip. Expecting probably 2 or 3 inches there, and the chances of tropical storm conditions, I imagine, are very high. Just looking at that, actually no, look at the very western tip there is just under the lower chances from the National Hurricane Center. It's eastern Nova Scotia that has very high chances there, and you can see is much different values on either end of the island. Same for Newfoundland, only in reverse, the western tip will have the highest chances of storm conditions. Well, at this point, we're about to run to the models. Does anyone else have any comments in our team just now?
Before we go to the models, I just want to say, Nathan, get ready for the absolute craziest things you could ever see.
Well, why am I not surprised? So let's take a look at the latest on Fiona then. GFS model here initializes it with winds of about 115 miles per hour, which is quite a bit lower than what it actually is. Let's take a look at the progression. It's probably straightforward in the sense of we've got a good idea of what it's going to do now. And look at that, hooking in and making a massive landfall on Nova Scotia, just turned post-tropical, but still sustained winds of at least 105 miles per hour over a large area. Look at that, an area probably twice the size of Maine there, with hurricane force winds.
That's bigger than twice Maine, to be honest.
Probably is. And then shooting off northwards, losing its hurricane force winds off the coast of Labrador, and then what's left of it reaches Greenland. So that's Fiona in a nutshell. Bermuda there, let's try and mark that on the map. Bermuda located here, quite hard to see. Let's see what winds the GFS gives it there, suggesting maximum winds of quite high, about 100 miles per hour, so probably category 2 conditions on Bermuda when it strikes there in about, must only be about 9 hours away now, getting quite close. Looking further east then, Gaston, and the GFS initializes that one with winds of around 62 miles per hour, which is nearly what it is, and quite easily doing that loop round. The reason why it's doing that is because it's being blocked from going north as it wants to by a massive high pressure, and I think it's being blocked going east because of another low pressure system, or I'm not sure, but eventually it circles back around, remains a tropical storm for a while according to GFS, longer than the National Hurricane Center I think gives credit for.
I
2 days.
think that it's going to have tropical storm force winds for a while, but as an entity, tropical or ex-tropical, it's going to be tropical for the next 2 days or so. That's why I think that the GFS has tropical storm force winds for a little while, Nathan. For you.
Let's check the main eastern Atlantic system and the central one. So first of all, you get that signature once again, tropical storm there, brief one off the coast of Africa. Fascinating track. if that verifies. And another area of interest down here, that's of course 99L. Brief spin up, and it keeps trying a little bit longer. 2 shots of becoming a tropical storm there by the looks of things. Well then, down to business, and the main one, 98L, initializes here with winds of tropical storm force, 44 miles per hour there, maybe 45. And what happens to it? Well, it continues through the Caribbean, takes a while to become a bona fide tropical storm by the looks of things. It's actually south of Jamaica by the time it gets there, and then it really starts strengthening very quickly. You start to see the yellows there, that's hurricane force, past the Cayman Islands, category 2, category 3, probably category 4, whilst it's still close to Cuba. Very strong storm. And then
it is
continuing to move northwards and northeastwards and slams into Florida, although weakens very quickly at the end there before it makes landfall. Probably only a category 1 landfall after a category 4 peak not very far away. If that was to happen, it would still bring a big storm surge.
It's worth noting that the GFS has done something very weird this run, because what we're going to have, and all models showed this, is we're going to have this big trough dig in from the Midwest and Great Lakes region of the U.S., and that's what's going to end up sweeping this system off towards the north. But instead of this system sweeping off towards the north like most models show it doing, instead the GFS just, for whatever reason, just completely shears the storm and weakens. So
wow.
So the GFS probably for this U.S. landfall is actually way too weak on this model run, to be honest.
It's not just this one. We were seeing the same thing last night.
Yeah, I don't think that the GFS is handling the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico portion of this hurricane, or potential hurricane, I should say, very well. I think that it's got a little bit of confidence in it in the Caribbean Sea part, but the Gulf I have less confidence on because it's really all over the place. Because I remember yesterday, it was having a few runs that took it into the Yucatan Peninsula, and then the next ones it was into western Cuba. I mean, it's all over the place.
It's
the system.
around, uncertain.
Yeah.
Let's look at...
I mean, yet you have other models like the Euro and the CMC, which have been pretty consistent, and then the GFS is just all over the place. So it's
maybe you can show us those ones in a moment. Eastern Pacific, what happens to Newton? Well, it holds on for a while and then dies off. Long range, nothing much. Central Pacific, any sign of Tropical Storm Hone? Nope. Western Pacific, let's take a look at these 2 current storms. GFS initializes both of them. Actually, the southern one only initializes as a depression, but it's quite clear it's a tropical storm. There's 17W, which moves into Japan there, quite clear cut. And then a small typhoon possible, making landfall in northern Luzon and continuing through the South China Sea and strengthening there south of Hainan, landfall in Vietnam. Behind it, this wave here starts to produce 2 other tropical cyclones, 2 tropical storms hanging around. One becomes a typhoon, quite a strong one actually, and continues northeastwards. Long range, another storm for Vietnam, possibly via the South China Sea. Quite long range though, nearly 16 days out. South Indian Ocean. Yep, there's a system that the GFS wants to try and form, but it's not going to happen if it looks like that. Oh, in the later part of the run, it does eventually happen in the Southwest Indian Ocean. And, oh my goodness, it turns around. Near the equator, it turns around. What is it doing? That's quite an insane model run.
I doubt that anything will happen down there at all.
And then a second storm forms at the end of that run there, so that's a long way out. Australian region, anything here? Nope. South Pacific, probably not. And just for giggles, the South Atlantic, nope. And Europe, the Mediterranean Sea, good news, there's nothing happening there either. So normal tropics in that sense, but a big hurricane possibly on the cards in the Gulf of Mexico. this is going to potentially be a serious event. Look at this frame. Has the storm at its peak. Pressure around 934, I think, was on the GFS. And probably a Category 4 there. One of many possible scenarios, even if it develops late, which we might well see. Even if those chances go down a little bit from the NHC in the short term, I think it will come back to bite. Like Harvey in a way, but not like Harvey in all of its other senses. Ethan, why don't you take us through the ECMWF model?
Sure. Due to heavy traffic on Levi Cowan's website, I'm only going to be able to look at 98L for these models that I've got loaded up. I've got the Euro, the CMC, Icon, H-Dwarf, H-Mon, and the ensembles. I've got them all up for 98L. So here's the Euro. You can see 98L here. Develops it, pushes the system off towards the west, looks to develop it south of Haiti a little bit, and then sort of struggles with it as it sort of gets itself together as its system pushes off towards the west. And like all models, once it gets past Jamaica, really gets going. The Euro doesn't really intensify it as much as other models, but takes it into western Cuba pretty soon, to be honest, and then really limits its time over the eastern Gulf of Mexico before plowing into hurricane, probably as a major hurricane there, and then really accelerating up the east coast of the U.S. That's a very extreme outlier, not likely to happen. If I had a guess, we're probably going to be a little bit more further west, but this is worth noting that this could happen still, but it's a very eastern outlier. Looking off into the CMC now, this model has been pretty consistent on the system as well. Once it gets past Jamaica, really goes off on the hill. Yeah, really goes off on a cliff there. And like the Euro, takes it into southwestern Florida. Although instead of the Euro, like the Euro, rockets this thing off towards the northeast, the CMC curves this thing back into the U.S.
Oh, man.
Making another landfall there.
That's an odd
near
track.
Charleston, South Carolina there. Very interesting track.
That's a track that you'd expect in the late season.
Yeah, not something like you're going to see in September. Once again, another eastern outlier. And you'll see why here in a second. Icon model here, just up to the next 5 days. You can see the system really developing on the late side of things, and then really gets going once again an eastern outlier. Very interesting to see this from these three main models. But once again, the Icon taking the system up into southern Florida. Here we go. H-Dwarf.
Okay,
oh boy, brace for impact. Let's see what it says.
Well, I've not seen this yet. Have you?
Neither have I. No, I have not. So,
Here we go.
Develops it pretty early on. That's very interesting. There's Jamaica. Goes past Jamaica, rapidly intensifying at this point. Into hurricane status here, passing the Cayman Islands, blowing up in the latest frames. Major hurricane now. Passing, I forget this, Isle of Youth, I believe is what that's called.
Correct.
From Ida. Into western Cuba, probably as a major hurricane, and then deepens further in the Gulf of Mexico. This is probably a strong Category 4 at this point. H-Dwarf has it, there you go, probably with winds of 145 miles per hour here, transiting the Gulf of Mexico. Where does it go beyond this run? I can't say, because the H-Dwarf only goes up to 5 days. But this is worth noting that in 5 days from now, we could be seeing a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll have to wait and see on that. H-Mon, I imagine this will show a pretty similar situation. Not really. Developing really late on actually. Holy moly. That's past Jamaica. That's
even if it develops that late, though, it could still get to major plus. And there it is. There it is.
It could just skyrocket faster.
Although it is worth noting, I'll pull up the same position there. Yeah, you can see. So the H-Mon has this halfway. I'm just trying to get like a box estimate here so that I can plot this on the H-Dwarf graph. So just give me one moment. Yeah. So here's where the H-Dwarf has it at 8 p.m. Eastern on the 27th. So the H-Dwarf has it right here. The H-Mon's down here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some disagreement, but actually that's actually pretty good regarding those models. So having a look at the ensembles, and you'll see why I think that these three models are really eastern outliers. So this is for the GEFS. And you can see there's our uncertainty cone. So this thing could still go into Central America, although that chance of that actually going into Central America is decreasing, unfortunately. I really would like to see the system go in Central America, even though that would cause some damage over there. It would lead to a much weaker storm. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, unfortunately, I think. And then there you can see those models really homing in on Western Cuba for this system to track into the Gulf of Mexico. Not really taking it into Southern Florida. I mean, there is some, but the general confidence is Western Cuba into the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. And you can see they curve those back into Florida there, really destroying it like the main model does. But it should be riding up the trough and not weakening. Weakening at a rate like what we were seeing here on the ensembles, but would be a stronger storm to make landfall in Florida, I imagine. But nonetheless, Western Cuba recurving up into the northern portions of the Florida Panhandle. Having a look at the Euro ensembles, I think they have a similar story. Not really, actually. More so
No,
into...
I was thinking it was going to be more east from what we saw in the ECMWF.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting, but you can see some still do take it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But regarding these 3 model runs and their eastern outliers, this is just one run. This is not a trend, because if you go back towards the 0Z run, you can see that it was having the system go into the Gulf of Mexico and striking the Florida Panhandle, and all of a sudden in one run it shifted northwest. So it's like, what's happening with this? I mean, I wouldn't really home on to this eastward shift that these model runs have, mainly because this just play a one-run thing, and I imagine that the next run we'll see them shift back into the Gulf of Mexico, because if I go to the graph here, that's 18W, that's not 98L. You can see there, Western Cuba into the Eastern Gulf. I think this is really going to be our hot spot, not really into Southern Florida or anywhere west, but I really think that Mobile over to Miami, Gulf Coast, is really going to be our hot spot for this one to make landfall.
Oh boy. Well, thank you for that, Ethan, with the model update there. And we're just about almost out of time here, but first we'll take some more comments and questions, and a thank you to P7 Edits, who sends us a message of support, and we certainly appreciate that. And we work as hard as we can. We're probably going to be building up to do a lot more live coverage in the next couple of days with Fiona, of course, roaring ashore in Canada, and then after that probably a lot more live coverage with 98L and whatever it becomes. Let's take some more questions. Super says, I think 90L will become one of the next named storms, and do you think it will form 90L, Ethan? What's your thought?
90L? I'd give it a decent chance at formation, although it's going to be really interesting to see, because we're actually having a so-called, at least I'd call it a race in the Atlantic right now.
Right.
Some people will be calling it the race to Hermine. Will 90L get there first? Will 98L get there first? We don't know. It's all up to what they end up doing.
I swear if 99L is the one to do it. My God.
Yeah. But it'd be very interesting to see if, because like literally, if you ask like a large majority of the weather community, they are sure that 98L is going to get to Hermine. It's going to be interesting to see if 98L gets to Ian instead, and 90L gets to be Hermine instead.
And that's why we don't pre-name. Adafira is in the room and has just posted a comment as well that says the race for Hermine rages onward. Would you like to add on to that at all?
No, I'm good.
Fair enough. Well, at this point, I think we'll finish up here.
New member.
Indeed. New member. Congratulations.
Thai interpreting weather. Welcome to Category 1, my friend.
And Matthew Lloyd, thank you for your support. Thoughts on the models having pressure as low as 921 on Fiona at landfall? I don't know which model said that, but that would be extraordinary. I mean, we just see that pressure keep going down, and from the last recon supporting possibly 930, Ethan? Any news on that?
Recon. We
Yes.
actually just got an iPass, actually.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh my, wow. 120 knot flight level wind, 110 knot SFMR. That's still a Category 4 hurricane there. Just got that pass through. A northwest to southeast pass. That still supports a solid Category 4 hurricane, maybe even a little bit lower than that. But extrapolated pressure looks to be down into the 930s, low 930s. But I know that some people are wondering why is the pressure down into the 930s for a hurricane that's only with winds of 130 miles per hour? Well, look at how massive this thing is. Bigger the storm, lower the pressure.
Even so, we've seen bigger storms with higher pressures.
Yeah. But this is starting its jet interaction. You can see the approaching front from the west, and that's going to slide this thing into Canada eventually.
There it is on Ethan's screen there, blowing up thunderstorms as it leaves the US East Coast.
It really caused for some very rainy afternoon and in portions of the Northeast. I got some reports of some heavy rainfall from my family up there today.
And to provide an opinion on that one, yes, it was an absolute trencher. Indeed.
We're just staying here a little bit longer to see if the JMA do anything. And to answer more questions, of course. And thank you to Ali Egg. Hold on a minute. Will TS-18W get named Noru? We're going to find out in a minute. Could Madeline regenerate? I don't think so. Ethan, what's the news?
CMA have named Tropical Storm Talas. That is almost guaranteed that the JMA will follow.
Which one is it?
I don't exactly know. I'm just getting this information from the public server, but I believe it's 17W. That is now Tropical Storm at Talas, which means that we'll also be having Noru join us shortly. I mean, given that both have gotten that Tropical Storm fix. But that's just the latest news that 17W is now Tropical Storm at Talas.
That's the northern one there that's hugging the coast of Japan right now. And it deserves a name, so I'll be pleased to see that. And so does the other one, so we'll see. We'll wait for full confirmation on those.
Unfortunately, we are out of time.
Oh, I mean, we don't really conform to our time schedules if we don't have to. We were just looking through some more questions in the meantime. Is it possible for Fiona to reach sub 930 millibars? And I would say it is possible. Ethan.
Noru has been named. Noru is now 18W.
So, 17W, the one in the north there near Japan, named Talas. 18W, the burst down there towards the bottom of the screen, headed towards the Philippines, will get the name Noru. I don't have confirmation at my end, so I'm having to rely on you guys for that.
Philippine name is Carding for 18W/Noru.
Well, that information is coming from the Chinese Meteorological Agency, and they actually tend to pre-name things because they actually get their information directly from the JMA. So the JMA lets them know that, hey, we're gonna name this. So, and then they put out products with that name, and that's how really we know. I mean, they've done it multiple times this year, and every single time that they put out a product with that name, they've gotten it right. So, would not surprise me. So that means that the next name in the Western Pacific, I don't know if you have it on your TWB ending, Nathan, but
it will be.
It's Kulap, the next name.
But unfortunately, it'll be
and Stonka.
Probably out of date by now, with all of those new names. So I'm gonna have to trust you guys with that because I'm still not seeing it on my screen. But there you have it, 2 new names, and.
Please do not mind the cats meowing in my background.
And Super says, can you believe it's been 2 months since I got Category 3 membership? Unbelievable. 2 months already. I remember when Super first became a Category 3 member some time ago. Doesn't feel like 2 months. And if anyone does have any suggestions about extra things we can do for our memberships, please let us know. But in the meantime, we are working very hard on our updates.
Hypercane rank?
No, let's not do that.
If you want some other news, Nathan, we've got ATCF out on some systems.
Okay, well, it's all happening right now, so you may as well let us know.
Sure. 17W, for some reason, JMA will be maintaining 30 knots on that. 18W is down or up to 40 knots. Nope, that's actually maintained, actually. So they've maintained that. The pressure's down to 1,000, interestingly, and out on all the invests. Tropical Storm Talas has been officially named by the Japan Meteorological Agency just now. Official from the JMA.
And which one is that?
That's
northern
the
one.
northern one.
Okay.
Currently located at 30.7 degrees north, 134.8 degrees east. So that is the northern one. Forecast to maintain intensity. Only forecast to live for 24 hours, maybe even a little bit less than that, before turning post-tropical. But the northern one, which is now on approach to Japan, is now Talas, as we've been saying, and this will be Noru pretty shortly officially by the JMA, as CMA have named it Noru.
All right, let's go to our closing segment here on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. I'd like to thank my team at this point for taking part once again on another very informative Tropical Weather Bulletin, and I'm sure you'll hear more from them again soon. Well then, on this day, September 23rd, 1959 was the day that Vera became a Category 5 in the Western Pacific and remained a Category 5 almost until striking Japan. Officially, it did make a Category 5 landfall, but ground observations suggest it was probably only a Category 2. Nonetheless, it was extremely damaging, one of the images available there. Gracie was a Category 1 hurricane in the Atlantic. It itself would make a major hurricane landfall in the US, and 10E was a Category 1 out in the open Eastern Pacific on this day in 1959. Today, the next named storm in the Atlantic is still Hermine, but for how long? In the Eastern Pacific, next up is Orlean, and in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. 3 years. 64 storms have formed so far around the world. In the Western Pacific, we now have Talas and Noru. Next now is Kulap. And in the North Indian Ocean, Sitrang is coming up next. And the Southern Hemisphere will be starting up soon as we enter spring and summer down there. In the Australian region, Darian is next up, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Ashley, and in the South Pacific, it's Harley. We'll have more updates and our next Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.